So if you want to go back to that video for those exact steps, you can just follow those verbatim and you should have the same results we did in the demo if you've done it correctly. Also, just realize that the deploying and working with and managing virtual machines, we're going to have a whole bunch of content on that coming up. But I did want to just go ahead and use at least one virtual machine so we can test our functionality for the core networking that we're doing with the standard switch. So have some fun as you build your skills and practice with the tools built into vSphere. And I'll see you in the next video for the walkthrough. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. And welcome back. Well, how did you do? How did you do in the hands-on lab? Hopefully it was great. In this walkthrough, I'm going to go ahead and walk through the tasks. I'm going to do it just on one ESXi host because it's virtually identical on 2 and 3. So I'm going to do it on 1. I'm going to go at a fairly quick pace. If you need additional reinforcement on any of the concepts or pieces, go back to the previous videos where we walked through them at a more moderate pace. And so in this walkthrough, I'm going to go ahead and just do it fairly quickly to help reinforce the concepts as a sanity check, to help reinforce the work that you did in the lab. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's do this. So here I'm sitting at DCNUG. That's our Windows computer. I'm going to click on the vSphere client here to launch it. This computer does not trust the certificate yet. So what we'll do is I will click on Advanced and scroll down and click on Proceed. I'm also going to bring this full screen with an F11. It'll give me a little more real estate. We'll log in as administrator at vSphere.local and we'll supply the lab password. And with that done, we'll click on Login. I'm going to minimize the recent tasks pane down here to give us a little more room. And I'm going to go ahead and clear these alerts by just clicking on Reset to Green until they all go away. All right, let's go ahead and open up the Nevada Data Center, open up the cluster called Prod1, and click on ESXi1, and click on Configure, and then click on under Networking Virtual Switches. Our first task, add a second uplink. No problem. So I'm going to click on Manage Physical Adapters, click on the plus symbol, and add Physical Network Interface VMNIC1. Click on OK. And that is one way of doing it. We also could have clicked on Add Networking and gotten there as well. That part is done. Step number 2, add a VM kernel adapter called VMK1 and associate it with switch 0 using the IP address 192.168.1.20 and then the host number. So to do that, we can click on Add Networking, still working with vSwitch 0, Add Networking. We're going to create a new VM kernel network adapter, so we'll leave that checked, that radio button clicked. Click on Next. We're going to put it on vSwitch 0, so we'll leave that alone. Click on Next. And then we'll go ahead and label this. And I'll call it our second VM kernel adapter, and that's going to be the name of the VM kernel port where it's associating that VM kernel adapter with the actual virtual switch. And then I'm going to specify that we're going to use this logical layer 3 interface for management purposes on this ESXi box, which effectively means this ESXi host can receive packets and send packets for management of this ESXi host on this new interface once it's created. So we'll click on Next. We'll click on Use Static IP Address and 192.168.1.201 with a 24-bit mask. And that looks good. We'll click on Next and click on Finish. We now have our second VM kernel adapter. It is VMK1. It's associated with a network label of our second VM kernel adapter. That's the name of the port group, the VM kernel port group that it's connecting to the switch with, and it's connected to switch 0. So that looks good. And then the third task was to create switch 1 with a port group called My Port Group. So we'll click on Add Networking. We're going to create if you click this middle option, we can do the switch and the port group all at once. Click on Next. And we're going to go ahead and create a new standard switch. It'll name it for us automatically. We're going to associate with that new switch VMNIC4 based on the instructions. So we'll select that, click on Next, and then click on Next. Then we're going to name this My Port Group. Based on the instructions, click on Next, and Finish. And now, if we minimize the standard switch 0, we can open up standard switch 1, and we got our port group, we have the uplink, and now we need to test it with a VM. So to do that, I'm going to right-click on ESXi1. I'm going to specify deploy an OVF template, and I'm going to go grab from my local file system here on DCNUG in the folder called, off the C drive, in a folder called Resources, we've got yvm.ova. That's our little open virtualization appliance image. And we'll click on next to deploy that. We'll put it in Nevada. It's going to go on ES6i1. We'll click on next. I'm going to specify it should go on the data store. On ES6i1, it only has one data store, so that's where it's going to lie. That's where it's going to end up. And then we'll click on thin provision and click on next. And then we're going to assign this to the network my port group, which is on our new virtual switch one. So that looks great. We'll click on next, scroll down and click on finish. Now we want to modify that virtual machine. So if you right click on it and we right click on it, and we say, and we go down to edit settings and it's grayed out, that's because it's still being deployed. So down here in the tasks, it's still being deployed. So we'll give that a minute to complete. And once it's completed, we can adjust it for more memory. So there we go. Shows it as complete. We'll right click on that virtual machine. I should have renamed it, but it's okay. And we'll click on edit settings and I'm just going to give it a little more memory so it doesn't complain. So I'll give it 128 megabytes of RAM. Click on OK. And then we'll go ahead and launch it. So we could right click here and go to power and power on, or we could, with it selected, we could click on power on right here. Anyways, great. And then to launch a console, we could either use the web console or we could use the VMware remote console. We demonstrated the VMware remote console in the videos up to this point. Let me go ahead and launch the web console, show you what that looks like. There it is. It's a brand new tab. And let's do an ifconfig. And look at that. It got an IP address from a DHCP server, and we'll do a ping out to 8888. And that's a Google server, a DNS server. Let's also do a ping to www.vmware.com, and that'll verify name resolution as well. And we'll do a Control-C to break that. Fantastic. So I'm going to hit F11 to get out of full screen mode. Go back here to our vSphere client. And I think that's it. Let me confirm our tasks. So let's check. Add a second. And I only did it for ES6i1, but as far as a demonstration, I think we're good. Add a second uplink. Yep. Add a second VM kernel adapter. Yep. Create switch 1 with a port group, my port group, and an uplink of VMNIC4, which we did. And then we tested it with a new VM, which was associated with that my port group. And it got an IP address on the outside network and was able to go out to the internet based on that. Now, I just love networking in general, and virtualized networking is like the best. So in this set of videos and lab, we worked with a standard switch. There's also something called a distributed switch, which we'll have a separate set of videos on. But all the concepts, like how it actually works and how they're linked together, those same concepts are going to be valuable to know as we progress in our understanding and working with additional switch types, including the distributed switch. So thanks again for joining me in this set of videos, and I'll see you, my friend, in the very next